When you get your fabric, it will be folded in half. The fold is right here, and the edge of the fabric where the two sides meet is right here. The difference is you can see where the fabric was cut, it's starting to fray. On this edge, this is where the fabric has been so tightly wound or woven that it does not fray. So let's talk about the anatomy of fabric. Because there is no stretch of fabric going this way, we call that the lengthwise grain, going from there to there. When you lay your pattern on top of the fabric, the grain line arrow must go with the lengthwise grain. Remember, it doesn't stretch, so when you're sewing it, it's not going to stretch out of shape. The threads that were woven this direction is called the crosswise grain. You will notice that when I pull on this, there is a little stretch to it. Not much, but there is a little bit. So remember, lengthwise, no stretch, crosswise, a little stretch. Another word that we used to describe how the fabric was woven was bias. Bias means that if I take the fabric and pull on it, it stretches a lot. If you were to put your grain line arrow going this direction, it would stretch out of shape when you're sewing it. So bias, crosswise, and then lengthwise is how the fabric was woven, lengthwise and crosswise. This fabric does not have a right or wrong side to it. It looks the same on either side, so it doesn't matter how it's folded together. But when you lay the pattern down and cut it out, you will automatically cut out two pieces. I know you can't see my entire pattern, but you can see the grain line arrow. Remember, this goes with the lengthwise grain. So the pattern needs to be turned like so. Some of the paper, as I turn this around, you're going to notice, may go off the edge. But that's okay. The only line you're going to be cutting on will be the solid black line, your cutting line. Now, to determine if it's going to be on the lengthwise grain, the first thing you want to do is to pin the arrow first. We stick the pin into the paper as well as the fabric, and then with the one finger we kind of force it up and stick the pin through. So we have the pin there, and the pin is holding the pattern to the fabric. The next thing that we're going to do is to measure the distance from either the fold or the lengthwise edge. We call the woven edge, the tight woven edge we were talking about before, we call this the selvage. So we look for our arrow, we take our tape measure, and we measure the tape or the arrow from the 1 inch, the edge of the tape measure is even with the end of the arrow or the line. We measure it all the way over to our selvage. It's 12, looks like it's 12 3/8. You've got to make the top arrow the same distance. So whatever it is from here over to the edge, you have to do the same thing with the top. Again, our bottom number registered 12 3/8. So again, I hold my tape measure even with the arrow, and this one says it's 11 3/4. So what we need to do is, if it's 12 3/8, you can see that we need to kind of bring our pattern so the arrow is even with the edge of the tape measure. So from there to there, we have 12 3/8. We will take another pin and we will pin our pattern down on the arrow. When you're cutting the fabric, be sure that your shears are very sharp. You take your left hand, you place it on top of the pattern. With the pair of shears, you keep the bottom blade right through here, flat down on the table, and you still hold it down, and you cut on the line. You cut slowly. We are not in a race, because if you cut too fast, you may cut off more fabric than what you want. Now normally we have notches on the line that we cut out so that we can match the two pieces of fabric together when we're ready to sew them together. You're going to do this all the way around your pattern. Cut very slow and very accurately. So that when you look at it, just because the camera is at an angle, you'll see some of the blue, but you really don't want to see any blue on the edge of the line. When you are done with this pattern, take the pins out, fold up your fabric, and bring me the patterns back. We need to use those for another class. Okay? Tomorrow we are going to cut out the felt pieces that will be hand sewn onto the penguin.